After this I saw another angel coming down from heaven. He had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice he shouted, "Fallen! Fallen is Babylon the Great! She has become a dwelling for demons, and a haunt for every impure spirit, a haunt for every unclean bird, a haunt for every unclean and detestable animal. For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries."
Revelation 18 verses 1-3 warns of Babylon's fall, describing it as a wealthy, indulgent, and immoral entity whose influence corrupts nations. Some interpretations suggest modern America fits this metaphor due to its materialism, cultural excess, and moral decline. The nation's increasing pagan tendencies, even within its churches, further align with the description.
Pagan influence in America.
Secularization. A 2021 Gallup poll found that church membership in the U.S. dropped below 50% for the first time, reflecting a move away from traditional Christian values. Non-biblical practices. Many churches celebrate non-biblical holidays, like Christmas and Easter, over biblical feasts, and the Sabbath is often replaced by Sunday observance, diverging from scriptural commands, Exodus 20 verses 8-11. Blending of worldviews. Pagan practices, such as astrology, mindfulness practices rooted in Eastern mysticism, and syncretic spirituality, have subtly infiltrated church culture.
Moral decline within churches.
Pornography use. Studies indicate that 68% of Christian men and 33% of Christian women view pornography regularly. Among pastors, 57% admit to struggling with it. Substance abuse. Addiction rates within the church mirror national statistics, with a significant portion of Christians battling alcoholism and drug dependence. Mental health struggles. Depression and anxiety are rampant among Christians, with rates comparable to the general population.
The church often fails to provide adequate mental health support.
Teen pregnancy and divorce. Evangelical teens are just as likely to engage in premarital sex as their non-religious peers, and divorce rates among Christians are roughly equivalent to those of non-believers. America's spiritual landscape increasingly reflects the moral decline associated with Babylon. The church's complicity manifested in adopting non-biblical traditions, failing to address internal struggles like substance abuse and pornography, and blending with secular culture, further underscores this parallel. These trends suggest a nation that has moved away from its biblical foundations, aligning it with the characteristics described in Revelation.
Then I heard another voice from heaven say, "Come out of her, my people, come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues, for her sins are piled up to heaven. And God has remembered her crimes. Give back to her as she has given. Pay her back double for what she has done. Pour her a double portion from her own cup. Give her as much torment and grief as the glory and luxury she gave herself. In her heart she boasts, 'I sit enthroned as queen. I am not a widow, I will never mourn. Therefore in one day her plagues will overtake her. Death, mourning, and famine. She will be consumed by fire. For mighty is the Lord God who judges her.'"
In Revelation 18 verses 4-8, God calls his people to come out of Babylon, a symbol of corrupt and idolatrous systems, including worldly churches. This is a warning against spiritual adultery, forsaking God's commandments and adopting pagan traditions. Many churches have replaced God's biblical Sabbaths and feasts with practices rooted in sun worship and other ancient pagan customs, such as celebrating Christmas on December 25th, which aligns with the Roman festival of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. God's judgment is declared because these institutions have become self-righteous, forgetting his commandments, adopting false gods, and engaging in materialism and immorality. The sins of Babylon are described as towering to heaven, and as the church imitates the world, it invites the same plagues, famine, death, and destruction. This serves as a stark reminder that the faithful must separate from worldly influences, repent, and return to God's ways, lest they share in Babylon's downfall. Daniel 7 verse 25, which describes a power that will attempt to change God's appointed times and laws. Here's the relevant passage. Daniel 7:25 He will speak against the Most High and oppress his holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times and half a time. This verse is often interpreted as referring to a religious or political system that would deviate from God's commandments and introduce its own traditions. Many believe this points to the Roman Catholic Church, which historically altered biblical observances. For example, the Sabbath was changed from the seventh day, Saturday, to the first day, Sunday, aligning with sun worship practices. Biblical feasts were replaced with holidays like Christmas and Easter, rooted in pagan festivals. The reference to daughters often symbolizes the Protestant denominations that broke away from the Catholic Church but retained many of its traditions, such as Sunday worship and non-biblical holidays. This interpretation suggests that these changes reflect a continuation of Babylon's influence, as described in Revelation, and a departure from God's original instructions. When the kings of the earth who committed adultery with her and shared her luxury see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her. This verse, found in Revelation 18 verse 9, describes the reaction of the world's leaders to the destruction of Babylon. It symbolizes a nation or system that thrived on wealth, indulgence, and immoral alliances, leading others into corruption. In the context of America, it could represent how the nation is deeply intertwined with global economies and cultures. Many nations have benefited from America's wealth, trade, and cultural exports, often indulging in the same materialism and moral decay. When America faces judgment or collapse, these leaders lament not out of love, but because their source of luxury, economic gain, and influence is gone. This parallels the biblical imagery of mourning over Babylon's fall, highlighting America's global impact and perceived alignment with the metaphorical Babylon.
Terrified at her torment, they will stand far off and cry, "Woe! Woe to you, great city! You mighty city of Babylon! In 1 hour your doom has come."
The merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Cargoes of gold, silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk and scarlet cloth, every sort of citron wood, and articles of every kind made of ivory, costly wood, bronze, iron and marble. Cargoes of cinnamon and spice, of incense, myrrh and frankincense, of wine and olive oil, of fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and carriages, and human beings sold as slaves. They will say, "The fruit you longed for is gone from you. All your luxury and splendor have vanished, never to be recovered." The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her will stand far off, terrified at her torment.
They will weep and mourn.
The passage in Revelation 18 verses 11 to 15 uses powerful imagery to depict the fall of Babylon the Great and the resulting despair of the merchants who benefited from her.
Here's an explanation of the metaphors and connections of metaphors and their meanings. Merchants weeping represents global traders and nations that relied on Babylon, or a nation/system like America, for economic prosperity. Their sorrow reflects the loss of wealth and trade opportunities. Cargoes of luxury items. Items like gold, silver, precious stones, and spices symbolize excessive materialism and indulgence. In a modern context, this could represent America's consumer-driven economy, which has enriched nations like China, India, and Russia through trade. Wine and olive oil. Wine often symbolizes joy, luxury, or spiritual corruption, excess and immorality. Olive oil can represent prosperity or religious practices. Together, they signify the abundance of wealth and spiritual decline in a society focused on indulgence over godliness. Ships standing far off. Nations like China, India, and Russia, which have grown wealthy through trade with America, are depicted as watching the destruction from a distance, unwilling or unable to intervene.
They are terrified at her torment, fearing the ripple effects on their economies. Scarlet and purple, church symbolism. Scarlet and purple in Revelation are associated with wealth, royalty, and religious institutions. Some interpret this as referring to the Catholic Church or other major religious institutions that have embraced wealth and power over spiritual truth. In America, this imagery can extend to churches that prioritize prosperity, political influence, or cultural conformity, resembling Babylon's corrupting influence. Connection to America. If Babylon represents America, the passage reflects economic power, America as a global trade hub, enriching nations worldwide. Materialism, a culture focused on luxury and wealth, symbolized by the described goods. Moral decline, churches adorned in scarlet and purple could represent religious institutions that have embraced worldly wealth and traditions, departing from biblical teachings. The judgment on Babylon serves as a warning against reliance on materialism, spiritual corruption, and idolatry. America's global influence and economic dominance make it a fitting modern parallel for Babylon, especially as nations lament her fall due to the collapse of their trade and prosperity. And cry out, "Woe! Woe to you, great city! Dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. In 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin. Every sea captain, and all who travel by ship, the sailors, and all who earn their living from the sea, will stand far off." This passage from Revelation 18 verses 16 to 17 depicts the sudden and total destruction of a powerful and wealthy city, symbolizing a nation or system of immense influence and luxury. The fine linen, purple, scarlet, and glittering wealth represent its opulence and global dominance. The sudden ruin in 1 hour highlights the swiftness of judgment, emphasizing its fragility despite outward power. Sea captains, sailors, and traders standing far off signify nations and industries that depended on its wealth. Their mourning reflects the collapse of trade and prosperity tied to this entity, leaving them stranded and economically devastated. This imagery serves as a warning against excessive reliance on material wealth and moral corruption, pointing to the consequences of spiritual and societal decay. When they see the smoke of her burning, they will exclaim, "Was there ever a city like this great city?" They will throw dust on their heads, and with weeping and mourning cry out, "Woe! Woe to you, great city! Where all who had ships on the sea became rich through her wealth. In 1 hour she has been brought to ruin. Rejoice over her, you heavens! Rejoice, you people of God! Rejoice, apostles and prophets! For God has judged her with the judgment she imposed on you." Revelation 18 verses 18 to 20 describes the reaction to Babylon's destruction and the contrasting responses of the world and heaven. Verses 18 to 19. The world mourns Babylon's fall. Sailors and traders, who relied on its wealth and prosperity, cry out in despair, saying, "Was there ever a city like this great city?" They throw dust on their heads, a sign of mourning, lamenting the sudden loss of their source of riches and power. Verse 20. Heaven, however, rejoices over Babylon's fall. The righteous, apostles, and prophets celebrate because God has executed justice, avenging the blood of his servants and bringing judgment on a corrupt system that oppressed and killed his people. This passage contrasts earthly grief over lost material wealth with heavenly joy for divine justice, emphasizing the ultimate triumph of righteousness over corruption. Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea, and said, "With such violence, the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. The music of harpists and musicians, pipers and trumpeters will never be heard in you again. No worker of any trade will ever be found in you again. The sound of a millstone will never be heard in you again. The light of a lamp will never shine in you again. The voice of bridegroom and bride
will never be hurting you again. Your merchants were the world's important people. By your magic spell all the nations were led astray. In her was found the blood of prophets and of God's holy people, of all who have been slaughtered on the earth.
Revelation 18 verses 21 to 24 describes the final destruction of Babylon, symbolizing judgment on a corrupt and sinful entity.
This can be interpreted metaphorically as follows.
The stone cast into the sea, 1821. The mighty angel casting a great millstone into the sea represents a decisive, catastrophic judgment. If this is applied to the US, it could symbolize an event that devastates the East Coast, home to major shipping ports critical to global trade. These ports are integral to the US's economic power, and their destruction would mirror the sudden and irreversible collapse of Babylon described in the text. The slaughter of innocents, 18:22-23. The passage speaks of Babylon's music, industry, and marriage ceasing, a judgment on its moral corruption. America's staggering abortion rates, approximately 4,000 daily, could be seen as part of this moral decline, with the slaughter of unborn prophets and believers likened to the blood of the innocent shed in Babylon. Furthermore, America's promotion of abortion worldwide mirrors Babylon's corrupting influence on other nations.
The Great Light and the Statue of Liberty, 1823.
The light of a lamp that will shine no more could symbolize a significant icon of America, such as the Statue of Liberty. This statue, often seen as a beacon of freedom and prosperity, has roots in Roman mythology, representing Libertas, associated with sun worship.
Its fall would symbolize the end of America's global influence and the judgment of a system promoting idolatry and immorality. The blood of prophets and saints, 1824. The passage ends by condemning Babylon for the blood of prophets and saints. Abortion, in this interpretation, is seen as silencing the potential voices of those God intended as prophets and believers. America's role in promoting this practice globally aligns with Babylon's reputation for widespread corruption and spiritual rebellion. This interpretation connects Revelation's judgment with America's moral and spiritual decline, emphasizing the consequences of turning away from God's laws and embracing worldly corruption. Revelation 18 verses 22 to 23, it is stated that the voice of musicians, the sound of the harpists and musicians, pipers and trumpeters, will never be heard in you again. This can be interpreted as a metaphor for the end of Babylon's cultural and artistic influence. If applied to America, this could symbolize the collapse of the entertainment industry, particularly music and movies, that has long been a powerful global export. America's music and movie influence. America's cultural dominance, driven by its music and film industries, has shaped global entertainment for decades. However, the negative aspects of this influence, perversion, violence, immorality, and the promotion of harmful ideologies, are part of the judgment described in Revelation. The widespread distribution of music, films, and television shows that often glorify violence, sexual immorality, drug use, and other vices, has contributed to the moral decay both in the US and worldwide. The music and entertainment referred to in Revelation can be seen as a warning against this cultural export. Just as the fall of Babylon means the cessation of its commerce and music, it suggests that the world will one day see the end of this corrupting influence, as the entertainment industry's negative and perverse content is finally judged and removed. The shift from today's influential, yet often morally corrupt, entertainment to a more righteous or purged system could mark the end of an era where America's films and music promoted destructive ideas, and their spread across the world ceased. This is a critical part of the spiritual and moral judgment on Babylon, where even its cultural legacy, music and movies, becomes a symbol of its decline.